but this breath is for me. Chandler Bolt, welcome to the Front Row Dads podcast.
Jon Vroman, what's up, man? Great to be here.
Dude, I'm so happy to be spending time with you, and I have found that's my routine whenever my schedule aligns with Chandler's. Is I'm happy to be there. I'm happy to be in that moment. I have a lot of good moments with you over the years, and the first one being this walk through the parking lot outside of Hal's event, 2015-ish, so somewhere in that era.
That sounds about right.
Yeah,
2014, maybe 2015.
And I just remember thinking to myself, the world should brace itself for Chandler Bolt.
I can't even imagine what that Chandler Bolt was like. That's probably 20 or 21-year-old Chandler Bolt that's overconfident and I don't know, very hungry though.
Dude, I think you had, let me share with you my reflection, man. What I remember about Chandler in that moment was a guy who was smart and confident, and yet had a lot of humility, because you were at that event, a humble learner. And I remember that. Totally. But I also loved how courageous you were in taking action and asking for help along the way. Like, so let's actually begin there, dude, with bold action. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that's always been part of your personality, your brand? Like when you go back to childhood, dude, were you always just going after it big?
Probably in some ways. I mean, I think the time that you're referencing that we met, that was kind of my hustle at the time. Was I couldn't afford to go to a lot of these conferences, so I would just reach out to the organizer and say, "Hey, I'll volunteer, I'll sweep the floors, I'll run the mics, whatever you need, I'll do it." And so that Hal's event might have been one of the first ones that I did that at. But I mean, going back even prior to that, with childhood, probably so. I mean, I think the scouting report on me as a kid would be like, he's not the smartest, he's not the tallest, the most athletic, but he'll outwork anyone. And I would just get a ton of it. And this is more so in sports, less so in school. That was kind of the opposite. Is like, okay, I could make good grades, but I didn't really care because I wasn't that interested. But when it comes to sports or anything like that, I would be the guy that was boxing out or diving for loose balls or, getting rebounds or whatever. It was not the sexy, like, oh, this kid's been getting lessons since he was 4 at this sport, but more so just, I would just out hustle people. So probably in a lot of ways. And then selling all my mom sending me to scout camp, selling all my snacks. And I came back with like a wad of cash and a switchblade knife. Because it was just that kind of, I don't know, that entrepreneurial spirit, probably because I watched my dad do it.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to talk about the present moment, because I really want people to know how amazing you are, and we'll get there through the show, but here's a little tease, right? This is what's happened for me, at least watching you over the last 7 years. So you're the CEO of Self-Publishing School, which I think is an incredible company. We'll talk more about that. And one of the reasons I wanted to have the conversation, because guys always ask me about writing books that can become legacy pieces for their children. So I want to talk about that. You are a Forbes 30 under 30 honoree, which I think is just incredible. And hat tip to you. An author of 7 best-selling books. So you're not just teaching people, but you've put a few books out there. The book published has done very well. In fact, I took a peek today on Amazon. There was like some 1,400 reviews. And as somebody who put out a book, and is extremely proud of the 194 reviews that my book has had, for somebody to get to 1,400 reviews is a testament to the impact that you've had in the world. And I just love that. Your company is an Inc. 5000. It's been on the list, the Inc. 5000 list, for some years now. And you host podcasts, Self-Publishing School, 7-Figure Principles. You've got all this stuff going on, right? It's just incredible, an incredibly successful business. And then when I peer into your personal world too, Chandler, I want to celebrate that your relationships that you have, right? How people talk about you when you're not around. That to me is one of the best parts of your bio. That's the one that's not so written, but is felt by those who are connected to your inner circle, if you will, or people that know you at your core. So that's who we're talking to, ladies and gentlemen. That is Chandler Bolt. That's part of, and I'm just, these are highlight moments here. So now let's go back in time though, a little bit. And I wanted to explore for this show your childhood, because I kept asking myself, man, what did Chandler's parents do? That would allow for this type of person to emerge in the world. I realized that some of it's nature and some of it's nurture. So, dude, can you take me back into childhood, and what was it like growing up in the Bolt family? And that's a big thing to unpack, but maybe just talk to me a little bit about what was it like to be in your home as Chandler Bolt?
Yeah, I grew up in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina, a town called Walhalla. It's outside of Clemson. If anybody's ever heard of the Clemson Tigers, my parents were very blue collar. They met working night shift at a factory, and ultimately just said, hey, there's a bunch of generational things that we're just going to do better, and we're going to put our foot down, and we're going to make this next generation better. So they didn't drink for, I think, 30 years while my brother and I were growing up. They just, like, all of these little, that's like a random obscure thing, but all these little things that they just did, that they said, hey, we're going to put our foot down and make this generation better. And I remember my pastor always, like, growing up, would teach about, cross-generational patterns, and how we have the ability to break those cross-generational ties or cross-generational patterns. And that's what they did, I think. And so it was some through what was modeled for them, and a lot through what was modeled for them, that they're like, hey, I do not want to be that or do that. And so they really encouraged me and my brother to fail a lot, and to, my dad grew up in a very religious household, and couldn't do anything. And so he was kind of like, hey, anything you want to do, I'm going to be supportive. You want to play sports, you want to be in Boy Scouts, you want to whatever, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to support it. So my dad's an entrepreneur, runs a small town kind of construction company. My mom was a dental hygienist for a while, and then ended up realtor. So, like, pretty much an entrepreneur. And so, yeah, there was a lot of those things, but I think it was the combination of parenting and an older brother who did really well at a young age. He's about 10 years older than me. And so for people who don't know, he plays in the rock and roll band called Need to Breathe. They've been nominated for a Grammy and done a bunch of big stuff. And so growing up, it was always, oh, you're Seth's little brother. Because he kind of got successful and started blowing up, which from my town, it's like, if anybody's successful, everybody's going to know about it.
Yeah.
And so that was, he's 10 years older than me. So when he's 18, I'm 8. And when he's low to mid 20s, I'm 15 or something like that. And so he was blowing up. And so I think that put a chip on my shoulder where I'm like, all right, I know I'm not Seth's little brother. Seth's my brother.
Yeah. Right.
And wanting to do big things, because there were big shoes to fill, and I didn't want to be like the footnote in his story. And so that certainly wasn't the driver, but I think it was a chip on my shoulder. And so between that and my parents, I think a lot of credit to my parents. But then I guess one more thing to make a long answer longer would be that my brother was one of my biggest supporters and cheerleaders. And I always say to either bigger brothers or sisters, like if you've got younger siblings, but also like the golden child, I think it kind of is synonymous. You being your other sibling's biggest cheerleader and supporter makes a massive difference. Because I could have easily just resented him, been like, oh man, people are coming around me because they just want to be close to him. He thinks he's hot stuff and is just like kind of poo-pooing on me and whatever else. And it's just like, but he didn't. And so that was very huge for me. And I'll never forget, he said, Chandler, people told me, when am I going to quit music and get a real job? And look at me now. And a job is just convincing someone to pay you money for something. You can do whatever you want. And it's like a cheesy thing that you can hear from people, but it's like, oh, he just did it and he came from this town. And my guidance counselor just told me I got 5 options.
Yeah.
And what he did wasn't on that list. And so that was the synopsis. That'd say the synopsis of it. But it's funny you ask, because literally him and I wrote this first book. It's called Breaking Out of a Broken System. It was all for charity. It is all for charity. So literally to this day, it's literally connected to the nonprofit's bank account. So one book sold, one life saved through a life-saving malaria pill. But it's kind of like these 15 things our parents taught us growing up that we thought were normal. We got out in the real world and realized no one gets taught this stuff. And then it's his perspective as a musician. And on these 15 things, you can see the black pages, white text. And then my perspective as a business guy on these same 15 things. So kind of right brain, left brain. And so this is almost like the inverse of probably what we'll talk about, is like writing a book as a legacy for your kids. It's like we wrote this book almost as a legacy for our parents.
Whoa, dude, that's incredible. I had no idea, man. That's new. That's new for me.
Yeah, that's in the archives.
That's so cool, man. Well, that's why we have this conversation, so things like that can emerge. Do you think there were things that your parents did, and maybe you wrote about it in that book, that actually teed up your brother being so supportive of you? Was that intentional? Like, do you remember your parents saying, I always said to Seth, like, you're such a good brother to Chandler, or do you remember that? Or was that also, as I'm always dissecting the nature versus nurture, how much was just born into the person versus taught?
That's a great question.
And he would obviously be better suited to maybe answer that, because they were speaking to him about that. You might have been the recipient of that.
I wonder. I mean, a couple core tenets of, so my mom, this was like always a big thing for her that I think played into this, is she would always say, I mean, it's like the Southern expression is like, don't get too big for your britches.
Yeah.
And it's just like, she'd be the first to check us on that. So I'm sure that had an effect on my brother of like, hey, don't get too big for your britches. Like, I know you're a rock star and whatever else, but like when you come in this house, you're not.
Right.
And, but I think there's also probably an element of it of, man, I'm trying to think what, oh yeah, that's what it was. So my mom would always, she'd always say, hey, no matter how well we make it, we will never talk down to people or as if we're better than people. And she's like, because she saw that firsthand where she was super poor. And she was like, the, kind of rich people or whatever else would kind of just be, whatever the word is, like just kind of talking down and just, that feeling of like, oh, that person thinks they're better than me. And it's really annoying. And so she was very adamant about that. And if she ever saw anything like that happen, she was like, no, that's not how we do this. Like, we will never do that. And so just like, she kind of always came back to that. And so that probably played in with me and with him as well.
All right. So you said there were 15 things in that book?
Yes, sir.
All right. What's number 8?
Ooh,
I have no idea. What's number 8?
Oh man. So we kind of broke it up into these 5 sections. We've got your mindset, your actions, your influence, your momentum, and your money. And so number 8 falls in the influence section, and it is living, learning, and passing it on, which is so obscure that I can't even remember what it was about. Dude, I'm like, what in the world is this chapter about?
Yeah, it was not so long ago. Somebody was on my couch and they were telling me something that I wrote in my book. They're like, well, you wrote this in your book. And I'm like, did I now? Could you please remind me? Because that sounds fascinating. What do you think that was about? Like when you see that title, or when I see you skimming it now, man,
I'm skimming it right
coming up
now is, let's see, your influence, living, learning, and passing it on. I'm talking about the Steve Jobs bashing in the walls. And when you grow up, you get told that the world is the way it is, and that's just the way it is. But then that magical day where you realize that life is just built up by people who are no smarter than you, building things. And so we talk about passing on your legacy. And so we talk about how our parents did it and how that was a very inspirational process, and never stop giving to never stop learning. And so like giving to others as part of your legacy, and then you will learn from that. So I think that was, we were talking about, how we learn from our parents, kind of that concept. And I'm just looking at mine, which is, that's
Yeah.
kind of the cool thing, is like this the same 15 things, but it's his perspective.
It's his perspective versus yours.
That's my perspective.
I'm fascinated right now, and have been actually for a while, about the modeling, right? It's like a lot of times we think we're going to write these 10 principles, hang them up on the wall, which I'm not bashing that idea. The values displayed in your home are great. But if you wrote 3 values that were aspirational and then lived 3 other values, your children are probably going to pay more attention to what's being modeled. What do you think your parents modeled that, looking back now, you're like, man, I'm so grateful that they demonstrated that behavior, they lived in this particular way?
Selfless service of others, discipline, and hard work. I mean, probably the biggest one was probably hard work.
Yeah.
Which
How
is
did
very
you see
generic.
that? What did that look like?
Oh man, I mean, my mom and my dad are 2 of the hardest working people I know. And my dad, they met working at a factory, and they just kind of, by the time I was out of the house, we were probably upper middle class, and they started lower class, maybe in the upper end of that, but probably not. I mean, living in like so where did I see that?
Was it just that they were working long hours, or were there things that you noticed about how they worked hard around the house, or,
It's a great point. I think we always had a garden every year, so there was that component where it's like, okay, we are growing these beans, and we are shucking corn and all that stuff. We heated the house with firewood, so every Saturday morning it was, I'm cutting firewood and splitting firewood with my dad.
yeah,
And then I try to get smart and get out of it and invite my friends over on Friday night. So that I was like, oh, I got friends over. Sorry, I can't. He's like, great, more help. And then my friends were like, don't go over to Chandler's house on Friday night. Oh, you're going to be cutting firewood, splitting firewood come Saturday morning. But just like a bunch of little things like that. My dad built our house and did everything besides maybe like plumbing and like a couple of small trades, but built our houses when I was growing up, and just all kinds of little things like that. My mom was an extremely hard worker, my dad running this business, and just little things like, if you're going to do the job, you do it right.
that's right.
High quality tools, high quality craftsmanship, just a bunch of stuff like that. And then combined with sports was just, you're not as good as these kids, but you've got a great equalizer.
Yeah.
Which is, you can outwork all of them. And it's like the classic hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And you can control that, the effort that you put in on a daily basis. And so just a lot of little things like that growing up, I think that reinforced that.
I remember my dad there's lots of phrases that now I think back on, like he said that a lot. And some of them I think are really empowering, and some of them, I think how you interpret them can go either way, right? It's like, I could see how some of them might have created some limiting beliefs for me because of how I chose to receive the phrase. But, one of them was, you always leave things better than you found it, right? I remember going to this lake house with my dad, and I've written about this, talked about this, up in Wisconsin, this little lake. And every time we were there on, quote unquote vacation, my dad would do work around the lake because he always wanted to leave the lake better than he found it. One year we had this like swing that you would sit in, and he's like took the boards off and stained them and painted them and got it back in tip top shape. And that was like the project that year.
Yeah.
So I liked how he showed me hard work like that. And I think that, do you think that also, being a guy now in your life, that you can outsource so many things? I know you don't have kids yet, and that's not why we wanted to chat today. I wanted to talk because of who you are as a human and your experience being raised by, amazing parents. I know you love your parents. But do you think that also that there's a danger perhaps in being able to outsource everything, and like, because you and I come from a world where it's like, why would we do that if we could pay somebody else to do it?
Oh, no doubt. Yeah.
But when it comes to kids, then, do we want to outsource everything? Or like, just because we can pay somebody to fix that swing, should we, bust out the sandpaper and do a little tough work, put our hands to something and make it happen, even if we could pay somebody else to do it?
Yeah, I've actually thought a lot about this. Because I'm a big fan of learning from people who have been or are where I want to go. And so I'm not a dad yet, but doesn't mean I'm not asking a lot of questions about it.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah. You're also
and
watching a lot of parents do their thing,
100%,
right?
100%. And so that's one of the trickiest parts. And I actually had a big conversation with a buddy of mine where we were saying, hey, we both grew up in very blue collar, high work ethic homes. Like, how do we keep from spoiling our kids?
There you go.
Because it's exactly this.
That's right.
If I can just pay someone to cut the grass, if I can just whatever, then they're not going to learn those lessons that I learned by having to do that and by growing up in a family where we had to do that. So we started talking about that, and his take was, all right, I'm going to hold out on buying this next house because I want part of my identity of my kid to their bedroom to be this closet in this small apartment in San Francisco. Or even he was talking about one of his buddies is super high up at Uber. And he's like, oh yeah, when we go fly somewhere, me and my wife flying first class and the kids flying coach. Right. It's like, you didn't earn this. You can fly back there. And but even that, it's like it inconveniences their life.
Yeah.
Which is, that's
one of the toughest parts, right?
It's like, if it inconveniences me, I'm going to be very much inclined to just say, pay someone to save the time.
Yeah.
And if the kids get lost, if they lose that lesson. So I don't know, probably forced labor and paying my kids to do stuff around the house will be like hiring them instead of someone kind of like my parents did, and putting some stuff towards their college and all that. That'd probably be my current thinking.
Sticking with the kid piece for a bit, and then we're going to transition into how people can start thinking about writing books, because I want to get to that today. But was there any part of your childhood, Chandler, that just kicked your ass, man? Just really hard, tough moments, tough lessons, dicey, seasons of your, let's just call it from birth to 18 in that era?
Yeah, a lot of different ones. I mean, I think, when my brother was a lot older than me, he was just kind of giving me a hard time because he's a decade older than me. So, I'm just the bane of his existence, and he's way bigger than me. So that was definitely an interesting time. I think probably rolling into, because I went to private school, like Christian private school, all the way through 5th grade, and then went into public school in 6th grade. And that was a culture shock. That was crazy. So then school got easier, but it was just like, you're learning a lot of stuff you did not know before. Like, I remember being in 6th grade, and one of my friends, somebody said something about a BJ. I'm like, oh, what's a BJ? They're like, ah! Like, Chandler, oh my gosh.
Right.
Class. And so it's just like all that kind of stuff was like, whoa, I'm getting out in the world right now. I'm learning some things. I'm learning some real life. And then probably that, and then rolling into maybe 9th or 10th grade, where I made horrible grades. I didn't really care. I was into music and stopped a bunch of sports. And so nothing that was crazy, but probably dropping out of college would be one of the big moments where it was like, okay, this is either going to work or it isn't. Yeah. And if it doesn't, I'm going to be an idiot.
Do you think that, and again, I think this is great to think about it from your vantage point as a kid. Would you send your kids to a Christian school? Would you send them to a public school?
Yeah, it's really tough, man. Really tough. There's book smarts and street smarts. And so I'd want my kids to learn both. And if you're so sheltered in a school that you can't learn street smarts, like, I think that's not good. So in some ways, I think having private schools set good foundations and then going into public school was probably good. But I was so far ahead of everyone. So there's no way it was good for my overall, learning. Like, I don't think I learned more for sure in high school, but I think there's that nice that nice mix, however you can get it. But yeah, that social skills is so important. Similarly, in college, I dropped out. And so a lot of people would think, oh, you're probably against college, but I kind of think everyone should go to college for maybe a year or two. And then after that, there's diminishing returns.
Decide.
Maybe it's trade school, maybe it's something else, but you're getting out of the house. You're in a new environment. It's a safety net. It's like all these things that like you can be really good for you versus just dropping off the deep end straight into life. And so there, I think there's kind of like, how do you get a little bit of both? So I don't have a definitive answer on that.
All right, let's skip ahead a few years and talk about the transition into the writing. So, all right, so self-publishing school now, massive success, multi-million-dollar company, impacted thousands of people writing books. But going back to the start of it, how did you decide that book writing, first of all, was going to be the thing?
Yeah, it's actually probably a testament to what we were talking about learning from childhood. Is I've never been like this guy that was super skilled or had this master plan, but I am very good at executing and just saying what's next. And there's my mom and my dad always talked about bloom where you're planted, or if you're sweeping the floors, you'd be the best floor sweeper that ever existed, and bloom where you're planted, and people will notice and opportunities will open up. And so that's kind of always been my mentality, even back to where we met, right? It's like, all right, I'm volunteering at this conference, I'm going to go all out and not just be on my phone in the corner, not doing anything. It's like, I'm going to make a significant contribution. And so I wrote and published a couple books. They did decently well. And then people started asking me about it. And so this was kind of as I was dropping out of school. I was working on a business at the time that was just totally failing. And people kept asking about the book stuff. And it's kind of like, you can only get smacked in the face so many times before you turn around and look. You turn around and look, there's a line of people there. And so I would get on the phone for an hour for free just to be a nice person and say, oh, you're working on a book, do this, good luck. And just kept doing that. And finally I said, I should start charging for this other business. I'm not making any money there. I got to make some money. I'm going to go move back in with my parents, go back to school. And so then we launched what ultimately became Self-Publishing School, had our first cohort of about 44 students. And I think it was about 60% of them wrote and launched a book in 6 months, which is just nuts, as you know, for any online training, much less writing and publishing a book. And I said, okay, this is working. I can get behind this, and I can be confident in this. And then, kind of had some crazy circumstances in my life as well, that kick-started and said, all right, I'm going to go all in on this. And then fast forward to today. Yeah, we've published about 7,000 books in the last 7 years and some change. And our goal is to publish 100,000 books by 2035. So a lot of good progress and a long way to go.
What do your parents and your brother think about your current situation?
They think I'm crazy. I mean, it was a long time before my parents even understood what I did. I would just tell people, because no one understood it. So it's just like, oh yeah, I print money from my MacBook. It's just like, or, just tell them something that was enough that they could understand it, or that they would just stop asking questions. and so I don't think they understood what I did for a while, but I remember I think my brother was playing Red Rocks or something, and we were in the hotel room, and I finally just kind of broke it all down. And then I could tell my parents were like, oh, got it. Like, this is an actual legitimate business. This is kind of how it works. It was just such a foreign concept. And then my brother's super proud because he's one of my biggest cheerleaders. And now I help him a ton in his business stuff. They've got, I don't know if I've ever told you this, like Bolt Farm tree houses is like these romantic tree houses. They've been on Netflix and a bunch of other stuff. But so they're scaling that company. And so now they're hitting me up for a bunch of business advice.
Sure.
It's been fun.
That's cool, man. When, so we got guys out there who I know have, and also guys who want to write books for their children. I still can't get over the fact that you wrote this book as a testament to your parents, a legacy piece for your parents, which I think is just awesome, man. I can't wait to get a hold of that. And also, by the way, mental note, better homework for next time so I come prepared knowing that. But hey, it emerged here. That's perfect. Let's talk about, for the guys out there who are like on the fence, thought about writing a book. And, like I think about Justin Donald real quick. And I think about Justin's got all this advice on investing, and everybody's hitting him up constantly. Hey, how do I invest? Where do I invest? He's like, well, I'm going to put these principles of how I think about investing in the book. And then there it is. There it is. Yeah, perfect.
Great book, by the way. He did
Yeah.
an awesome job with this.
And I remember talking to Justin and I said, dude, you should write this book so that at least Savannah has this, right? Like if something happens to you, unfortunately, in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, we don't know what's going to happen, but wouldn't we want that as a gift to our children? And I really think that every father should consider writing a book for their family to pass along that wisdom, right? So that if we don't have the conversation, if we don't have a chance to model that every day, every week, every month of our lives, that we have this wisdom, whatever that is. I don't know. It should be for everybody to decide what that is. I don't suppose that every book has to be about your business or teaching a skill set in that way. It could just be your 10 principles for living a good life, whatever. How should a man think about this? How should he start thinking about this?
Yeah. So there's two paths. You nailed it. I mean, either you're writing this book to grow your business, you're writing this book as part of your legacy for your kids, or maybe a little bit of both. And so that's kind of the starting point. Hey, why are you doing this? And then what would you write about? And for a lot of dads or just people listening to this, it's probably around the thing that you keep getting asked about. It's like the thing that people know you for. It's the broken record conversations that you have in your business that you just keep repeating that thing over and over and over again. So just like you said with Justin Donald. And now you can just point to that book. And so it'll be one of the best things you ever do to get leverage on your time. Because when people ask you questions, you say, hey, just check out this book and then come back to me if you have questions. And so now you're able to help a significantly higher amount of people. It's what I call leveraged impact, right? You do hard work. It's in this sign behind me if anyone is seeing this video versus the audio version. But leveraged impact is the ability to create something once, this book. That book goes on to impact thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even millions of people. So that's really powerful if you want to go from one to one to one to many in your business. But then it's also very powerful for your kids and your legacy. And so that's where I think, I got asked one time, a guy said, do you think everyone should write a book? I said, absolutely not. Some people shouldn't write a book. And he said, well, what about this? What your grandfather or your grandpa or your grandmother, like, do you ever wish, are they alive? I'm like, no. He said, do you know much about them? Oh, my grandpa was a legend, everyone says, and he died when I was 1 year old. So I don't know much. He's like, do you wish you could read his book? And I said, touche. And that really changed my opinion on this, where if nothing else, you're writing the lessons that you've learned into something that you can give your kids, your grandkids. I think it's really a generational impact kind of thing.
And even if it's stories.
Yes.
So I gave my dad this journal and it was like a bunch of prompts. And I said, would you tell me more about your life? And it's all these things like questions, he fills it out. And it took him a year and he handed it back to me. One of the things that I could also appreciate was that at his age, at 77 years old, a lot of what the questions were leading to, when my dad would say, I don't remember a lot about that right now. Right. And so I think that it's important that also you don't wait until you're in your 60s or 70s to be able to write that book. I think you should try to start writing that book now, even if it took it took time, if it took years to get you there. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're in your 60s or 70s, I still think now might be the best time. I think that it's just what you're currently presented with. But I do think that having the words captured early is important. I haven't talked about this in a while, Chan. Let me show you something. I think it's also cool about, sharing words is that it doesn't even have to be their words, but words that impacted them, right? Stories of it doesn't have to be their story of triumph, but like my dad telling a story about his buddy in the Navy that overcame something was very impactful for me. So just repeating the stories that you've been exposed to and that influenced your life. My dad handed me this plaque one time, and I know you probably won't be able to read this, but for those that are watching on YouTube, you can see this very old looking plaque, and it says, do you know this poem or this writing by Calvin Coolidge? It says, it's titled Persistence. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. And my dad said this hung in his dad's office. It then hung in his office. And now I've got it right here next to me.
That's so cool, man. That's so cool.
And the reason I share that is like, it's just the power of passing along words.
Yes.
There's something special about that. Like there's also something special about sitting around the fireplace and telling stories, right? But there's something that's beautifully concrete about the words that are in writing, that are kind of etched in stone, if you will.
I agree. That's powerful.
Yeah. So if a guy is out there, and let's just talk to that guy who's on the fence right now, and he wants to, he's like, yeah, Chandler and Jon, yes, I've been thinking about it. I should write that book. I do believe that. I wish I had my grandfather's writing and story and history put on paper. But what do I do? How do I go about doing this? I'm not necessarily a writer. Maybe somebody would say I'm not necessarily a writer. Your company takes them through a process, right? Where they don't have to be the author. They don't have to know what they're doing. You're going to guide them through the writing process. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So my first two, I'll give a piece of encouragement or two, and then some very practical advice. So my encouragement would be, a lot of people watching or listening to this, you're probably thinking, this sounds great, but I don't have time, or the timing isn't right. And it's kind of like you were alluding to earlier, Jon, is the best time to plant a tree 10 years ago, second best time today. And so there's never going to be a perfect time to write a book. It is a short-term investment for a long-term asset. You're going to make a sacrifice for 90 days to a year or so, and you're going to have to give up a lot of stuff in that time, and it's going to be really hard. But if you do that, you're going to end up with something that you're proud of, that will last long after you're off this earth, that will make a significant difference and impact. And so and there's never going to be a great time. So a lot of people say, maybe someday, maybe next year, and then they just never do it. And so would be my encouragement is to start. And then very practically, the way that I would start is I've got this, we break it down into kind of these 8 milestones. This is in my new book, and you can see the visual on the book page on Amazon if you want to see that. But it's basically these 8 milestones. And I feel like, as a C-level English student and a college dropout, I'm really good at making complicated things simple. And so it's this simple. So the first 4 milestones is what I call the M.O.R.E writing method. M.O.R.E is an acronym. M stands for mind map, O stands for outline, R stands for rough draft, E stands for editing, right? And so very simply, what I would recommend is take 15 minutes as soon as you're done listening to this interview, and mind map everything you can think of on the topic of your book or the topic that you might write about. Set a timer, think about stories that you have, lessons that you've learned, books that you've read, all that stuff, and just brainstorm. And you're going to use that mind map to create your outline. You're going to use that outline to write the book one chapter at a time. And what a lot of people have found is that when they go through that mind mapping process, they got a whole lot more that they can write about than they thought. And so it just makes the whole rest of the writing process easier. And so that would be my very practical next step for people who are thinking about it. It's just, as soon as this interview is over, take that 15 minutes and see what you come up with.
I think it's such a powerful exercise for a dad to sit down and make a map, a simple mind map, in the next 24 hours. That's your quest, men. Next 24 hours, and ask yourself, and it may not be the topic, by the way, for your book, but ask yourself, what would you want your kids to know about you or about life? Like, if your kids read a book about you, wanted to know their like if your grandkids wanted to know you, what would be the essential pieces on that map that you would want to live on, that you wouldn't want to be lost, right? It's like these secrets that, for hundreds and thousands of years, somebody's been testing these medicines, these plants, these processes for hunting and gardening and connecting with their source, whatever that is. It's why would we stop the flow of information, right? Why would we not want to pass that on? I think that when we really get dialed in and centered and grounded, that's exactly what we know we should do. It's almost a responsibility to do that, whatever that might be. And maybe it is how to run a particular business, if that's the thing you need to pass along, but maybe it's just the life principles. I'm going to do this. I'm going to commit to making my mind map, Chandler, and thinking about what I would want to share with my grandkids. That's how I'm going to frame it, is if my grandkids wanted to know me, what would I want them to know? So
that's cool. That's a great prompt.
I really appreciate that. Chandler, when you think about of the 7,000 people who've written these books, do you have examples of dads out there that have written the books and how they might have approached it, or stories that you might be able to tell in that way of a specific person? Or if you have to leave their name out, that's fine. But
yeah. Oh, heck yeah. Got a lot that I could think of. One that I'll share is a guy named Sumner. He was one of our earliest authors. He's a physical therapist by day, and he worked with us to write and publish a couple physical therapy books. That you might be thinking, that sounds lame. This has nothing to do with my impact as a dad or a human or anything. It's really helpful for people though, right? He has a back pain book. He has a neck pain book. So it's like taking this physical practice that he does and then being able to scale it outside of seeing patients one-on-one. So that in itself, I think, is really cool. But where the story got cooler is that his daughter saw him do it. And she said, "Hey dad, that looks interesting. I want to do that. I want to write a book." He said, "All right, why don't you go?" It was either 50 or 500 words. So why don't you go write 500 words and then come back to me? Kind of get it. I think I'm not a dad, but what I've learned and what I saw my parents do is you kind of give your kid a little bit of a roadblock when they got this, and just see if they do it. And then if they do, say yes. But if not, then you don't have to say yes to the thing. And so he thought, she's not gonna do it. She comes back a few hours later. She did it. And so he said, "All right, let's get a little bit more serious." And so they started going to Panera Bread on Saturdays and working on her book. And so she ended up using this process to write and publish a book at 8 years old. It's called The Fairies of Waterfall Island. And so it's a kid's book. And in the first 3 months, I think it did about $4,000 in royalties, or $4,000 in sales. She donated all of that money to an autism awareness charity because she has a friend with autism. And so she wanted to do something to help. And then now, though, she has a monthly allowance that's her book royalty money that shows up every month. She did a speaking gig at her school. The first one she made, I think it was $1,200. They gave her a $250 speaking fee, and then she sold a ton of books. So she's doing speaking gigs. She did a book signing. Her and I were on Good Morning Sacramento, like all this different stuff at 8 years old. And when I think about, and it's been years since then, so it's been cool to kind of see her grow up. But when I think about the trajectory of her life as a young woman, the confidence that has been built, the life skills, like all the things. I mean, her life is forever changed because her dad wrote a book.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really powerful example that kids, or not kids, parents, your kids are watching. When you do it and lead by example and go do this thing, they might be interested as well. And so it's been really cool because she has since, inspired other kids to write and publish books and all these things. And it started with her dad saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this and make this a priority."
Chandler, I love all this, man. I want to close us out today by, first of all, thanking you for your time, man. Appreciate you, squeezing me into the schedule, sharing a little bit about your family, your childhood, and also how guys might be able to get connected. I'm assuming if a guy wants to look at writing a book through your program, and by the way, some of our guys have children that are grown and are definitely in a place where they can write their own books too. So men can help support their children in creating the books that they want to write. Of course, where do they go? What is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So two different resources that might be helpful. So the first is my new book. This goes kind of end to end on the process, big picture. The new book's called Publish: The Proven Path from Blank Page to 10,000 Copies Sold. And what we'll do is we'll create a link. And so by the time this is live, you'll be able to go get a free physical copy of this book. So if you go to publishedbook.com/front row dads, okay, so publishedbook.com/front row dads, go to that page. If you're in the US, fill out the form, tell us where to ship it. We'll print it, pack it, ship it for free. No shipping and handling, no anything, no strings attached. And we'll give away a bunch of books. If you're outside the US, you can fill out that same form and we'll just give you a digital copy of the book. So that'd be the first place. Go to that publishedbook.com/front row dads, or if you like audio, you can just get the audiobook on Audible or something like that. And then the second place, if you're saying, hey, I'm serious about this and I'd love to talk with Chandler's team about potentially working together, go to selfpublishing.com/apply. Book a call with the team. We'll talk about your book, your goals, your challenges, start to put together a plan and see how we might be able to help. So publishedbook.com/front row dads or selfpublishing.com/apply. Those are the two best places.
Awesome, man. And hey, to just, to wrap this up, my question is going to be this. When you have kids, if you have kids, right? If that's in your future, I'm just wondering, what 3 things in your heart right now do you feel you would want to bring into your family, right? That were, throughout your life, throughout your experience being a kid, throughout all the things you've seen other dads do with their kids, if you have a family in the future, not to put pressure on you, but I'm just wondering, and maybe you could even look at it from the angle of like, what would your greatest wish for the world be that dads bring these 3 things? It could be traditions, it could be questions, it could be values, it could be anything, but just 3 things you would want to bring forward or hope men bring forward into their families.
It's so funny that you asked that. I just went to a dating and marriage conference at my church this past weekend with my girlfriend, and the guy was talking about, and I know you talk about this as well. He talked about it in a little bit a different way than I'd heard it, which is like kind of a family mantra. It's like we are, my example would be bolts, like we, this, and this. I think it was, we're kind, we're courageous, we're brave or something. And it's just like, so that his son, anytime he was getting anxious or anything, it's like, who are we? And so then me and my girlfriend were kind of writing down, it's like, what would that be? What would your version of that be for our family? What my version? I wish I could. I was like a big setup to say, I don't fully remember it. But, and so it's like, this has actually been on my mind recently, which is, I would say, we work hard, we help others, we believe in ourselves. Like, and that would probably be kind of that affirmation almost for my kids is, hey, we work hard, we help others, we believe in ourselves. That's what comes to mind right now.
That's cool, man. And when it comes to the believing in yourself these days, Chandler, you have a lot of social proof that says you're doing good. You have a lot of, things coming at you going, hey man, you're kicking ass. But how do you keep your head straight every day? What's that look like for you right now?
As my mom would say, don't get too big for your britches. So I have friends and family that will remind me of that for sure. I think probably the harder part though is not having your identity tied to your business, which I haven't really fully figured that out. I almost lost the business at one point, and then it just caused me to start asking questions, who am I if I'm not the business? And I just noticed that my confidence and my morale tie pretty closely to how well the business is doing. And so that's a cycle that I'm trying to break out of. And even as I would set goals for the year or whatever, it's like, oh, these are self-publishing schools goals. These are not Chandler Bolt's goals. Like right now, this is my life. They're very closely tied. But what are my goals for Chandler? And just kind of that decoupling. This is Chandler as a human. This is self-publishing school. These are 2 different entities. And my confidence in myself should not be rested on this. So I think that's the thing that I'm trying to untangle right now is Chandler Bolt thinks he's hot stuff because of how self-publishing school's doing. But why does that matter for Chandler Bolt's confidence? I feel like a douche speaking about myself in third person.
No,
But like it really decoupling those, I think it's a really hard thing to do. And I'll let you know when I figure it out.
hey, I think it's actually a wonderful exercise for everybody to just take a moment and consider. And when I went to Burning Man this year with Tatiana, one of my thoughts was, who am I without Tatiana? Right? Who am I without Tatiana? A really interesting thought. Who am I without my children? Who am I without my business? Who am I without this part of my identity? And not that you need to be without it. It can be a wonderful part of your life, but it's interesting to know who you are independently from that, so that when you dance with that thing, that person, that business, that moment, then you understand who you are, your sovereign being, right? Your full cup being brought to those endeavors, whatever that might be. And that because nothing is permanent in this world, we will not be with our businesses forever, nor our spouses, nor our children, nor this planet. It's important to know who you are outside of those things. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I agree.
Chandler, much love, my friend. Thank you so much. I look forward to more. Next time we do this, dude, we're going to sit in person for our conversation.
Yeah.
We're going to make that happen. All right, buddy. Thank you so much. I'll let you get about your day, and please come see me, come see the Vromans, come hang with us. I would continue to welcome more Chandler Bolt time.
We'll do it, man. Appreciate you.